Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 43, Close Shave. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the show. Maggie wants spending money from Maxwell, who is about to give in when Fran butts in and suggests that Maggie get a job. Maxwell likes the idea of Maggie learning responsibility, but dislikes the idea of her working at the Gap with her boyfriend or taking a job from someone who could actually use the money. Fran comes up with a solution and suggests that Maggie gets a volunteer job and follows through by getting her a job as a candy striper through a doctor she once broke up with. Maxwell and Maggie have initial doubts about Maggie's fitness to work in a hospital, but she excels, volunteering 5 days in a row, never late. Meanwhile, Cece has taken up a cooking class and torturing Maxwell with her culinary creations. Maggie convinces Fran to cover for her at the hospital so she can go to a concert with her boyfriend Peter for their 8-week anniversary. Maxwell isn't feeling so well, but Fran convinces him to go out to a business dinner with Cece so that she can sneak out to the hospital. While Fran is there, Maxwell comes in as a patient, needing his appendix out. Cece pretends to be Maxwell's wife before leaving the room, and Fran tries to disguise herself so as not to be recognized, but Maxwell sees through it. The doctor, however, mistakes her for a nurse and asks her to prep Maxwell for surgery, including shaving him. Fran assumed he meant Maxwell's face, only to be corrected. Niles interrupts her as she's prepping the surgical field. After the surgery, Maxwell tells Fran about his strange dream he had as he was going under the anesthesia. He was married to Cece and Fran was his nurse. Fran has him thoroughly convinced that it was only a dream until she starts spraying whipped cream like she had sprayed the shaving cream. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, you got it.
Thank you. It was a little bit longer than usual because I sort of ad-libbed, but I felt like I had to cover all that.
There was a lot that happened.
Yes. Would you like to take us to scene 1 then?
Yes, so we open in the kitchen and Fran is at the counter. She has like a little wet cloth or something on her forehead. She's, taking some type of medication with a glass of water. Niles walks in and asks, "Oh, is it that time of month again?" And she's like, "Yes, it's time to make my credit card payment." Of course, which of course is not the expectation.
Correct.
And we learn, that she has a system. Although Niles is like, "Not me," I'm tapped out.
Did you get the system down?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
So, if you want to help too, that's fine. But she has an American Express card that she pays off with the MasterCard.
She
which
pays
then
off. But she has to pay off the American Express card because if she buys a piece of gum, the SWAT team storms the building.
Exactly. So she pays that off with her MasterCard, which in turn she pays off with her Discover card, which in turn she pays off with the City Trust Visa.
The
And so,
Optima card, which is then
yes,
paid off by the City Trust
sorry,
Visa.
that's correct. And then so Niles notes, "Well, that means your City Trust Visa, that balance must be so high." And she's like, "Yes, it is. So high that they give me an espresso, which then I sell to pay off the American Express card."
Mhm.
So that is her method. And Niles is impressed and says that she should be the president of Mexico.
Correct.
Um, and then in walk Maggie and Maxwell. And Maggie says, "I need some money." And Maxwell right away, as he's sitting down at the table, is like, "Sure," opens his wallet. And Fran, in the meantime's like, "Whoa, aren't you generous?" And Fran's like, or sorry, Maggie's like, "What? It's only $50," which of course
Mhm.
is to anybody else like that would have been a ton of money for me as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of though gives pause to Maxwell. He's like, "Oh yeah, I did give $50 to you yesterday." In the meantime, there was this comment that $50 Sally
Struthers.
Struthers could feed a lot of children with that. And then she makes a comment, although looking at her, do we think she's feeding anybody else? not a great comment. But anyway,
No.
Maxwell notes that he gave $50 yesterday. And like, what happened with that? Oh, I bought clothes for school. Oh, clothes for school. Wait, don't you wear a uniform? Oh,
Right.
daddy. And she starts doing that. I love you so much.
Before
He's like,
that, she says, "Oh, Dad, don't be mean. I love you so
so
much."
yes. And he's like, oh, okay, this is the last time. And of course, Fran butts in again. I don't mean to derail the gravy train,
Right.
but isn't it time that she get a job? And then Maggie kind of jumps on that. It's like, oh yeah, I could work at the Gap. But then it's pointed out, isn't that where your boyfriend Peter works? Oh no, is it?
Yes,
Trying
the
to
way
play
she delivered
innocent.
that was great.
Yeah, it was. She tries to go off for innocent, like, oh, I hadn't realized that. And
Exactly.
and Fran's like, oh, don't open a Pandora's box. But she's basically saying, if she has a job, she can learn responsibility. But Maxwell's like, isn't she too young? Um, and then he also notes, as you said, that you know what well, Fran continues saying like she shouldn't get used to having everything delivered to her on a silver platter. At this point, though, uh, Niles brings Fran some orange juice on a silver platter. So of course she
Correct.
takes that, saying, "Thank you, Niles," not noticing the irony there. But anyway,
Exactly.
um, as you noted, Maxwell also brings up the fact, and aside from being too young, well, we wouldn't want her to take a job from someone who would need the money. And so then Fran's like, oh, volunteer work. And at first, Maggie starts, yeah, wait, you mean so I'd have to work and I wouldn't get paid? I thought,
Right.
we're rich. I thought, why should I have to do that? I'm rich. And Maxwell's like, no, I'm rich. You won't be rich until you're dead or until I'm dead. And
Right.
then Fran's like, oh, wait, hold up. That might have been Mr. Mendez's line of reasoning as well. Um, and that's another reference. I think we've talked before about the
The
Menendez
Menendez
brothers.
boys. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically in this first scene, we're setting up this whole idea that Maggie's going to be getting some type of job,
Hmm.
volunteer job. Is there anything you want to add to that first scene?
The only thing that comes to mind is at the beginning when Maggie's asking Maxwell for money. And you're right, he immediately goes to give her money. Fran makes a comment about how her father was never so generous with me, unless, of course, he was asleep and his pants were hanging on the back of a door or something like that. So, like, she
Yeah.
would just go and help herself to the money. Her parents wouldn't give her the money the way Maxwell's giving it to Maggie.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Do you want to take us to the office?
I would love to. So scene 2 starts basically with Cece coming in saying, "I'm sorry I'm late. My cooking class ran over. Taste this, taste this." And she's very excited and she has a bowl and she hands it to Maxwell. And he takes it, he like kind of looks at it, he takes a spoon, puts it in his mouth, and he goes, and he has this look on his face, like clearly it's not tasty. Um, and Cece realizes that there's, oh, let me grab a tortilla for dipping, and so she starts digging, rustling through her purse, and turns away. Niles helps Maxwell out and offers him the plant to spit the food into, which he
Mm-hmm.
does. And so Cece gives him a tortilla for dipping, and he like has this very fake smile on his face to dip it into the bowl. And of course, Fran saves him by walking in by saying, "Guess who got a new job?" And Cece assumes it's Fran. "Hallelujah, Nanny fine. Don't even give 2 weeks notice, girl. You just go, go, go." And as a token of my appreciation, she hands Fran her watch. And Fran gets very excited. "Oh, Miss Babcock, it's gorgeous. I don't know what to say." "Oh, yes, I do. I'm not the one with the new job. Maggie is." Meanwhile, with the distraction of Fran coming in, Niles opened the doors to the between the office and the patio, and Maxwell threw the tortilla out and it sort of flies into the neighbor's yard.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, like a frisbee.
yeah, exactly. Which I guess speaks volumes to how edible it would actually be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Fran starts telling them the exciting news about Maggie and how she's going to be a candy striper, that Fran arranged the job through a doctor she once broke up with. And Niles is like, you broke up with a doctor? Uh-huh. A very successful anesthesiologist. But when I went out with him, I didn't feel anything.
Mm-hmm. And she kind of like looks blank, looks out into the distance when she says that.
Yeah, I mean, I find that I enjoy that line immensely. Maxwell doesn't see this as the victory that Fran does because, he's not sure Maggie should be working in a hospital. And Fran's like, what's the worst that can happen? She's going to forget to bring someone their Jello snacks. And he's like, you see that aquarium over there? What aquarium? There are no fish in there. Margaret forgot to bring them their Jello snacks. Fran doesn't back down and says that basically this job is going to be great for her. It's going to give her purpose to help people, to marry a doctor, to move to Great Neck, to drive a Caddy SDS with a North Star engine and make her cousin Marcia so jealous. Oh, I'm back now. She realized that she was totally like living vicariously through Maggie. And basically towards the end of the scene, Fran notes the bowl of Cece's cooking on the desk and says, oh, Miss Babcock, is your dog here? And she's like, what? No, Chester isn't here. And she's like, what's with the cycle too? Oh, that I made that Nanny Fine cooking class. Nanny Fine, who knows nothing about hot cuisine or whatever. And Fran's like, well, I know when food's supposed to be served in a bowl with a name on it.
Mm-hmm.
Needless to say, cooking is not Cece's forte.
No, it is not.
Do you want to add anything?
No. The next scene, we are at the hospital, and both Maggie are there, and Fran's explaining to Maggie that she'll get some good karma out of working at the hospital. And then she's like, oh, look over there at that woman over there, and we see this lady on a gurney, just kind of in the forefront of the scene. And they walk up, and Fran's just like, oh, let's cheer her up. And then she opens up her compact. She starts putting on makeup on this lady, and she's telling Maggie, when you look good, you feel good. And very proud of herself, right? And after she's done putting on the makeup, they walk away. And of course, that's when an orderly comes, places the sheet over the face of the woman who is clearly deceased.
Correct.
And wheels her away. But Fran and Maggie don't really notice this.
No, they do not.
No, they're oblivious. But then we have Fran asks a lady, oh, I need a doctor. What are your symptoms? I'm 30 and single. Ha 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 ha. And then the lady's like, oh, that's funny. 30.
Exactly.
And again, it turns out this lady, I guess, must be in charge of the candy stripers there. And she kind of asks Maggie, are you sure about this? It kind of gets rough around here. And Maggie's like, oh, excuse me for a minute. And she kind of pulls Fran aside. And she's like, maybe Dad was right. Maybe I shouldn't be. And Fran stops her and says, first of all, don't ever say that again.
Exactly.
Second of all, we watched all those Rescue 911s, to prepare for this. And Maggie's like, but that's fake. And Fran's like, no, it's not fake. It's a reenactment of a real event, just with better looking people.
Right.
And then at the same time, though, we see kind of someone with a needle about to administer a shot. And so Fran and Maggie together, Fran's saying to Maggie, oh, don't let it get to you. It's just a needle. And Maggie's like, yeah, I'm fine. But then turns out Fran is not so fine with seeing a needle. She's like, see ya. And she faints.
Correct.
Do you want to add anything?
Nope.
Okay. Can you take us to the living room?
I would love to. So Maggie is with her new boyfriend, Peter. And she's bragging about her time at the hospital, about how this job gets more amazing every day. And his reaction is not to engage with her about how amazing her job is, but he says, make that pouty face. And Maggie, sort of obliges, but continues her story. And she's talking about how, she really is helping people. You should have seen the look on this woman's face when I told her that her thighs already looked smaller. And so they end up, kissing on the couch, and Fran comes in and starts talking to Maggie, asking about the name of the pizza place. What do you guys want? What does Brighton want? Because Brighton's, hiding under the table, under the tablecloth in the same room with them. And then Maxwell comes home and Fran asks, how was dinner at Miss Babcock's? What'd she serve? And he's like, I'm not quite sure, but I have the feeling I'll be tasting it again this evening. And Niles is there and he's like, well, judging by the hour, you must have liked it well enough to stay for seconds. And he like huffs and walks off. And Maxwell's confused, like, what's wrong with him? And Fran's like, you come home smelling of another chef's cooking. You've got sauce on your collar. He's not stupid. And Maxwell sort of, pivots and asks her if she has anything for an upset stomach. And she lists the entire pharmacy that she has in her purse. Are you gassy or just bloated? And he's like, I'd like to keep some mystery between us. Why don't you just surprise me? And then he comments, oh, I see, Peter and Maggie are still on the couch. And Fran's like, don't worry, I've been here all night. At that precise moment, Gracie rushes down. Fran, the commercial's over. Honey, you're having a nightmare. Go back to bed. Go back to sleep. Yeah. And so at this point, Peter and Maggie have gotten up and Peter's saying hello and he's on his way out. So he's going to say goodbye. And Maxwell comments on how he's wearing a lovely shade of lip gloss. And so he leaves. Or actually, has he left yet? Anyway, I can't recall. He leaves in the scene, but anyway, so yeah, he hasn't left yet. So Fran says to Maxwell, basically, look, she's proud of Maggie, look how good she's been, 5 days in a row, never late. You'll never hear out of my mouth, I told you so. And so then Maggie starts telling them about this woman who just came back from the Amazon and a weird bug laid eggs in her cheek and they started to hatch. And needless to say, Maxwell's stomach's already upset. So he leaves and Fran gets nauseated. So she leaves. And Maggie's just like, why doesn't anyone want to hear about my work? And that's the point where Peter invites her to a concert. She says, I can't wait to get back to the hospital tomorrow. He's like, oh, but I got us tickets to the Meat Puppets. And she's like, oh, well, it's not like you're paying me. I'll find someone to cover for me. I'll call you later. And he leaves. Fran comes out and Maggie basically is like, I need a favor. How should I put this? Imagine if you were young. Not a great way to start. And Fran points out, honey, don't get creative. Just tell me. And so Maggie's like, I can't work tomorrow night because Peter asked me to a concert, but I'm going to get someone I really trust to cover for me. And Fran at first is like, oh, okay, that's fine. Hey, wait a minute. No. And Maggie's like, but it's our 8-week anniversary. And Fran's like, 8 weeks? What is that? Lint? And Maggie's like, Maggie tries to convince her saying, Fran, you could pass for 16. And Fran's like, 16? No way. 18 maybe. But I'm supposed to be teaching you responsibility. And then Maggie uses the same line she used on her dad in the first scene. Fran, don't be mean. I love you so much. And Fran's like, honey, that only works on your father. And so she like pouts and is like, please. And Fran's like, oh, all right, but just this one time. And Maggie thinks that they don't have to tell Maxwell. And Fran's like, oh no, don't start lying to your father now. Save that for when you come home wearing your shirt inside out. And so Maxwell comes downstairs and Fran's going to tell him about this arrangement with Maggie, but he cuts her off and says that he wants to tell her that she's been doing such a wonderful job with Margaret and how he'd been trying to teach her responsibility for years. And Fran just waltzed through the door like that. And he calls her a remarkable young woman and asks, what are you going to do next? And she's like, I'm going to Disneyland. And she runs out.
Yep.
Do you want to add anything?
Just that whenever like Fran walks in while Maggie and Peter are making out, she's like nonchalantly asking about the pizza place. And like they're making, like she's responding as if she can understand what they're saying. Like, first of all, the pizza place, no, not that one. I'll just look it up. And then what do you want on it? Oh, can't we just do half and half pepperoni, half,
Canadian bacon.
And then of course she like again nonchalantly is like, Brighton, what do you want? And that's when Brighton, like the side table has like a long like fabric covering. And he lifts it up, sticks his head out. I'd like a calzone. So anyway, just noting that like she was not phased at all. Like this obviously has happened a lot.
Correct. And she also was clearly giving them their space,
Yes.
which was not what Maxwell had in mind.
Yeah. Yep. So the next scene, we're in the kitchen. Brighton's at the kitchen table eating. Fran comes down the steps and she's like being very sneaky about it, right? But Brighton,
Hmm.
without even turning around, says, "Hi, Fran." And Fran puts the candy striper outfit, the uniform, in like the bread box in the back. And she's like trying to, um, she's kind of defensive in a way. Um, like I'm not hiding anything.
Right.
But basically, she's like, "Oh, why aren't you eating in front of the TV in the living room like a normal kid?" And well, the furniture. And she's like, "We paid thousands of dollars to Scotch guard the furniture. No one is brave enough to try it out." Shoo shoo, like basically getting Brighton to go into the living room with his food.
Right.
And then he goes and she takes the uniform out of the bread box, but just then Niles is, coming in. So she quickly throws it into the refrigerator. And
Not so quickly, because she also traps her purse in the door.
yes, that's true. But she was like, "Oh, Niles. Oh, so good to see you." And Brighton's in the living room, is eating in the living room.
Exactly.
And basically what we learn is that N- well, Nell says to her, "What time do you have to be at the hospital?" 6. Oh, what? How'd you know? He's like, "Well, at 5:15, uh, the Peter's like blazer pulls up. 5:17, I hear a thunk uh outside my window or door.
Miss
5
Margaret sneaking past my door. I
Yes.
found this. And he holds up a glove.
hmm At 5:20, I hear a wail from the schnauzer next door." So he knows what's going on. Basically, Maggie has gone out with her boyfriend. So, of course, Fran's going to be the one who's covering for her. And then he also, though, as like a final kind of piece to his thing, is he opens the refrigerator and pulls out the candy striper uniform. And he's like, "And there's a candy striper uniform on the ham."
Correct.
So I missed the first word. Fran's like, "What are you, blank butler?" Did you catch what she said?
She says, "Thank you, F. Lee Butler."
Epsley?
F. Lee Butler.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And then Fran asks if Maxwell's still sick. Um, and he's like, "Oh, I'd be surprised that you would want him to be, up and about." And she's like, "Oh, no, no." But then Maxwell, we hear him entering. "What's he doing up?"
Exactly.
And so Cece and Maxwell walk in, and uh, Maxwell keeps saying, "Miss Babcock and I, ugh. Miss Babcock and I, ugh." Like every time he starts saying it, he's like groaning in pain.
Hmm.
And Niles, of course, says, "Yes, I know the feeling."
Exactly.
But Cece's like, what he's trying to say is that Maxwell and I need to go out to a meeting. And Niles says, "Oh, Miss Badcook. Oh, I mean Babcock. Um, so you won't be poisoning him tonight." And Cece kind of sidles up to Niles and says, "You know what? I think you're jealous.
Yep.
Don't keep it interesting. For 20 years, it's the same old recipes. You've let yourself go. Maxwell is bored." Like all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And um and again, he's not Fran tries to work like comfort Niles. "Oh, she's fantasizing." And Niles is like, "I'm not worried. This isn't the first time he's, strayed, but he always comes home for breakfast."
Hmm.
Um, and then Fran asks Maxwell before he goes, Like, are you feeling like, how are you? Like, how are you
She says
feeling?
he really doesn't look okay or something. Like
Yeah,
he really
and then
looks
so he
sick.
starts saying, so he says, "Oh, should I stay at home then?" And Mac Prince like, "What am I, a doctor?" And like kind of shoos him out to
Right.
follow
Go,
suit.
go.
Yes. Yep. So we can tell like Maxwell's already in pain. Still in pain, whatever.
He's
Do you want to
ill. He's
Yeah.
ill.
Yes. Do you have any thing
No,
you want to add?
no.
Okay.
I do not have anything to add because I'm just so excited to get to the next scene.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So this for those who have seen this series before, this is an iconic scene, which is why I'm so excited to talk about it. For those who have yet to see it, I highly recommend watching it because even our discussion of it, I don't think we'll be able to do it justice. Um, so the next scene, we're in the hospital and Fran is in the candy striper uniform and she's clearly being very helpful. She's sitting on an empty patient bed reading a magazine and the phone rings and
Mhm.
she's confused and she answers, hello. And
Yeah, and just to cut you off just quickly,
sure.
right before that, there's like a very short scene where all the candy stripers are sitting around reading magazines and it pans to all the young girls and it pans to Fran and she's reading a magazine called Longevity. And the lady we met in the first hospital scene comes up and says, "Oh, I need one of you to work an extra hour." She looks at Fran. You don't look like you have a curfew. Um, so, you know, she sends Fran off to go to the linen supply room with stuff. But then we cut to this next scene where now Fran is just sitting in a hospital bed reading the same magazine.
Yeah. Sorry. I jumped right to
Yeah,
what I wanted to talk about.
it's okay. Go for it.
Thank you. Sorry. I needed to steal this scene from you. I apologize.
It's
Um,
okay.
except I don't. I do, but I don't. Anyway.
Yes. Sorry, not
Um,
sorry.
exactly. Sorry, not sorry. Um, so she answers the phone and she's like, hello. And it's her mother. Ma, how did you find me here? What's the emergency? And there's a pause. And then she's like, Mike Douglas isn't on Channel 4 because they canceled him 25 years ago. Could you spring for a new TV guide? And like, as their conversation is ending, we hear, but don't quite see, someone else saying, don't worry, it's just his appendix. It's a very routine operation. You're going to be fine, Mr. Sheffield. And so at some point we cut over to the other part of the room. Fran has like pulled the curtain so no one can see her. But in comes Maxwell on a stretcher with Cece and the doctor says, now just relax. I promise, no more pain until you get my bill. And he says to Cece, like, he'll be back in the room in a few hours. Are you the wife? And you can see Cece thinking very quickly, yes. And she gives Maxwell a big kiss and then she walks out very pleased with herself.
Mhm.
Fran pulls back the curtain and instead of being in the candy striper uniform, she's now in a surgical gown. She has a surgical mask over her face. And I mean, yes, you still see her big hair, but like
Mhm.
she's covered up. So she's trying to hide her identity.
And I'm
Uh,
presuming this is the stuff she was supposed to be taken to the linen supply closet.
Probably. Yeah. Um, and the doctor sees her and addresses her. Like she thinks she's going to sneak out, but the doctor sees her. Nurse, help me prep for surgery. Okay. Fran's like, oh, okay, you look good. And she's like patting him down and like blowing on his stethoscope. You're a doctor. You can do it. And the doctor's like, not me, the patient. And so she like goes over towards Maxwell and he sees her. Oh, Miss Fine. And she's like, oh, yeah, you're fine. I'm fine. We're all fine. And the doctor comes it back and says, shave him and hands Fran a razor. All right, you're the doctor. She walks over to the bag, gets out the shaving cream, puts it on his face, and is like starting to shave his face. And the doctor's like, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I have no idea. I mean, the man has a slight 5 o'clock shadow, but it's not like he's going to a bar mitzvah. Shave him for surgery, says the doctor. Well, where do you want me to shave him? Oh, and she realizes where the doctor wants her to shave. And she's like,
Mhm.
I'll be back in a minute. I have a girl who can do a bikini wax. And the doctor's like, now.
Mhm.
Fran's like, oh, all right. And she starts humming and lifts, she moves the blanket down off Maxwell and she lifts up his surgical, his like patient surgery gown, whatever. And she starts spraying the shaving cream up towards his midsection where she thinks she's going to have to shave and she's not looking and she's humming and she puts the gown back down and starts like massaging the shaving cream around his lower torso, shall we say. And she's like not looking. She doesn't know what she's doing. And in walks Niles with a pot of flowers and he sees her fucking for a raise. And she just has this embarrassed, shocked look on her face.
Yes. I really felt like she was like channeling like Lucille Ball in this scene.
Yes. I was talking about this. I was talking to my mom and I said that we were doing this episode this week. And she's like, yeah, she also was like, she's like, that's something like Lucy would have done too.
Oh
Like,
yes. Yeah.
um,
Because it's just like her facial expressions, like and her mannerisms too, just like you're saying, she's not looking. She's like "Do, do, 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 do."
right.
And then even as she's patting, trying to spread it around, she is not looking. But of course her hands are right there when Niles walks in and she like
Mm-hmm.
frozen in place in that position for a while.
And she does, I
And
think, pull her hands back.
when he, was like asking about the raise, they makes that comment.
Correct. So this is actually the longest laugh in the entire series in this scene.
Mhm.
Um, I can't remember where I saw the interview or if I read it or if I watched it, but the actor who plays Maxwell talked about this scene. And one of the things, I don't remember his words, but I remember the sentiment being like part of why the joke was for Fran to think shave his face was to cover up the smile because he couldn't help laughing in this scene.
That's smart to put the shaving cream then
Mhm.
on the face.
Um, so two other things I want to note. One, you can actually see he's still wearing his wedding ring, at
Mhm.
this point. And two, for the first time I think I've ever I've actually like was watching his face and you can see like his eyes are open and his eyebrows are moving. And so I think as an actor, he was having a hard time with the scene.
I didn't pay too close attention to his face during it, so.
Fair, Fran's face was definitely getting more of the attention.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
But yeah.
Was this what you were expecting? Because I think
No.
okay,
When you said longest laugh, I was not expecting this. And I was not expecting this with the title, Close Shave.
fair. Um, it yeah. I just anyway. I'll save it for later. Do you want to add anything to the scene?
No, no, you did a great job.
Thank you.
So we're in the kitchen and Fran's like trying to open a jar. She's apparently making a sundae for herself. She even takes a maraschino like cherry about to eat it when Maggie again is still very enthusiastic about her job. And she's talking about how, oh, you should have seen it. The eyeball was hanging by a bloody vein. So of
Mm-hmm.
course that is off putting to um, Fran and the cherry.
Yeah.
But Maxwell walks in, um, and Maggie's like, "Oh, your color is looking really good. Your pulse? Oh my god! Oh my god! What? Oh my god! Peter's picking me up in 10 minutes!" And she runs off. And Fran notes to Maxwell, "Oh, even Dr. Quinn needs her mountain man."
Yep.
And then Maxwell starts talking like, "I had the wildest dream. I was married to Cece, and you were my nurse." Oh yeah, that's the drugs, says Fran.
Right.
And when my mother had her hysterectomy, she, thought that it was on 60 Minutes, and I was like, why would Mike Wallace, do a whole episode about that? So he's like, oh yeah, yeah, must have been that. But then, right as Maxwell's about to leave, Fran takes the whipped cream and starts putting it on the spraying it on her sundae, and a look of realization comes to Maxwell, and he goes, "Miss Fine."
Exactly. Although I'd say it's a realization and also horror.
Yes. Yes. Um, so yeah, he realizes at the end, but we don't get to see what happens after that.
No, we do not. I have nothing to add.
Okay. Do you want to do the final credit scene?
I'll let you do it.
Okay. So we're in the living room, and it's back in that scene where Maggie and Peter had been making out, and they had found Brighton underneath. And you know, Fran's like, "You love torturing your sister." And he's like, "Well, it's something to do until I get my license." And Fran just kind of comments to Maggie and Peter, "Oh, he's been out of control since we scrambled the Playboy channel." So that's it. That's the episode.
So before we jump into our shticks, I felt like this episode moved very quickly.
It did feel like it was going. It had more of a pace to it.
I think it was also because there were fewer scenes than normal,
Mm-hmm.
or shorter and then much longer scenes. So like, anyway, yeah, we should have known something was coming when Maggie needed Fran to cover for her as a
Oh
cancer
yeah.
stalker.
Like I was assuming that I was assuming that Maxwell would catch her at the hospital because he was not feeling well. I was not expecting it that he needed his appendix removed. I thought he would just go in with some gastrointestinal, complaint.
Mhm.
Not surgery, not under the effects of anesthesia. Um, so, but yeah, I would say kind of before we jump into our shticks, um, again, like for the most part, it was funny, but there were just some things that like stuck out. Like, doesn't Peter look older to you? Not really.
I didn't notice.
I feel
Sorry.
like it's one of those situations where you have like a 26-year-old playing a high school student. At least
Well,
me, like
I'm not
it's
even sure how old he would have been at the time versus how old she was.
Mhm.
So
I don't know. He just looked older than like a teenage boy, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, I guess that makes sense. Um, uh, I'm, I mean, when I was rewatching it today, I did think to myself, huh, you know, Maggie looks older. Like she doesn't quite look like a high school student.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, she did look a little older, I think, um, in this particular episode for some reason. But the other thing is like, why is Brighton underneath the table? Like, that's just weird.
he's a younger brother. He's being a pain in the butt. That's
But
what
what
they
is he doing? Just observing his older sister making out?
pretty much. He's keeping an eye on things so he can use it for blackmail later.
Mm, maybe. But yeah. Anyway, did you have anything to say, or did you want to jump into the shticks?
We can jump into the shticks. Um, yeah.
Okay,
Would you like to
so
start with? Go
favorite
ahead.
fashion. Um, did you have any fashion in particular you wanted to talk about?
Um, let's see. So Maggie actually in the first scene was wearing something I thought notable. She has a black and white outfit. It's a dress, and then she has a matching black headband, which looked more grown up than a lot of the things we've seen her in.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, just back to your point. The actor who played Peter is Ron Melendez, and he's about 6 years older than Nicole Tom, who plays uh, Maggie.
Okay, gotcha.
If that makes you feel any better. You're like,
I
no,
was just,
not really.
oh, and I was just saying, like he just looked like that situation where you have like he didn't look like a high school student. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
A lot of times in like teen shows too, they have like 26-year-olds playing teenagers. So that was just my note with that.
Yeah. So at the time, he would have been about 22, give or take.
Okay.
22, 23, almost 22 and a half. She would have been a teenager still. She would have been, I'm trying to do math and I'm like afraid I'm going to do it wrong. And yeah, she would have been like
16,
16.
17.
Yeah.
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 Anyway.
Sorry, that was totally a tangent.
On the side. With Maggie's outfit, like the outfit she's wearing whenever Peter asks her to the concert and then she's trying to convince Fran to cover for her, that looked very, this is kind of mixing shticks, but very 90s to me because it was like that velvety dress look.
Yeah, it was pinkish and had a wide neckline, and I think it had sleeves or partial sleeves. Yeah.
That were
I,
different. It was like a different material, like a different color.
yes.
I couldn't tell if that was like a spaghetti strap dress with something under it or if that was all one piece. I couldn't really tell, but it just struck me as very kind of 90s with that look.
I'm not gonna lie. I took one look at her dress, the dress you're talking about, and thought it looked somewhat juvenile.
Yeah.
And like that was as far into it as I got.
Now, of note is the candy striper outfit
Yep, I have that on my list.
that both Maggie and Fran wear. And what's funny is, of course, in the scene where that quick scene where we see Fran with the other candy stripers. I didn't mention this, but you know, when the lady tells her, "Hey, you look like you don't have a curfew," you know, Fran gets up and you know, the lady looks at her and her in the outfit and it's like, "Oh, is that appropriate?" And this guy who's in a wheelchair and a broken leg going by, like, is so busy looking at Fran that he like crashes into the wall instead of going through the door. And Fran makes a comment, it works for him. And then she's sent off with the stuff to the linen supply room.
Right.
But yeah, so like they give off a different air when they're wearing those uniforms, I would say. Wouldn't you, Debbie?
Yeah, I would also say that they're slightly different. You know, Maggie's wearing white sneakers and white socks. Fran is wearing white pointy heels.
Yeah. So, yeah, the accessories are different.
The accessories are different. Maggie wears a little cap. I don't think Fran wears the cap because her hair won't fit under it. So this is not the only time we're going to see like Fran. We actually saw this previously in season 1, the nanny-in-law, where Fran put on the nanny uniform, which she then spruced up more to her liking.
Yeah. Yeah. She makes it her own.
Yes, very much so. Were there other outfits you wanted to talk about?
Not particularly. So if you do, go for it.
Just 2 others. In the scene where Fran is trying to sneak out to the hospital, you know, she wears this hot pink coat, which sticks out. And to me, it was just like a weird.
It's not very subtle.
Exactly. Like if you're trying to sneak out, maybe try to blend in a little bit better. That said, I kind of like it. And then the only other outfit I think I wanted to, I didn't really like a lot of what Fran wore in this episode. I didn't like the yellow suit she wore. You know, it was like a jacket.
Yeah, I think I might have liked it better in a different color. Maybe, I don't know.
It sort of reminded me of the black and white and red outfit we saw last week. That sort of felt like a uniform, like a driving uniform or something.
Yeah.
Here it just kind of made her look like an angry bumblebee. And I say angry because she's underneath it. She's wearing a red turtleneck with long sleeves.
It was an odd combination.
Yeah. And then in the first scene, I think she's wearing like a vest and I think a skirt, like black with white pinstripes and then like a tie. I didn't care for that either. So this was not a favorable fashion episode.
Yeah. Okay, so notable New Yorkers.
All right. Would you like to start?
Well, yeah, let me flip my pages back. So did you look up who that Sally?
Yes, I did.
Okay, can you give us some info on her?
Sure. Sally Struthers, an American actress and activist. She is best known for her role of Babette on Gilmore Girls.
Oh, okay.
According to her Wikipedia, so this is according to our friends at Wikipedia, she also played Charlene Sinclair on The Dinosaurs.
Really?
Totally dating ourselves right there with why I pulled that as a reference. But yeah, I had no idea she played Charlene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. When you say Gilmore Girls, I'm more, oh yeah, that.
Fair. Yes, I like to pick the references that speak to me,
Mhm.
in hopes that they speak to others. Yeah, so that's who she is.
Okay. Yeah, still not a fan of that comment that
Fair.
Fran made. Now,
Okay, well,
Pandora's box, we've probably talked about,
well,
have we?
so what's interesting is she doesn't say Pandora's box. She
Well,
says,
that's
go ahead.
yeah, that's what I was curious about because I was like, I didn't think she said Pandora necessarily, but that's obviously what she was kind of trying to say.
Right.
What
And
did she actually say?
she says Pandora's box.
Oh,
And I
that
don't,
makes me think of Bewitched.
that is what I took it as well. The mother of Samantha Stevens on Bewitched is Endora.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we've spoken about Pandora's box on the podcast. So, for those who are not familiar, Pandora's box is a story from Greek mythology about Pandora, who was curious about the contents of a box, or it's actually a container, and she opened it and therefore released all kinds of bad things and curses on humankind.
Mm-hmm. And the last thing that was left was hope, I think, wasn't it?
That sounds right. I always focus on the all the
The
horrible
bad.
negative things that come out.
I
That's
got
also
really.
according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah, and as mentioned, we've already talked about the Menendez brothers before, but just to summarize, these brothers like killed their parents for their money, right?
Yep.
Essentially. So again, I guess the nanny likes to make that reference. I guess it would have been like timely, back then, current event.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So,
While you're looking for your notes, gravy train, according to our friends at dictionary.com, the phrase gravy train likely originates from 19th century railroad slang.
oh, really? I
Yeah,
didn't. I didn't. I didn't know the origins to that phrase.
I was curious. So, um,
Hmm.
the Gap is a clothing store.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if the pizza place that Fran was trying to ask Maggie about, the one on 57th,
Oh, I'm
was
not.
any actual thing of note because there was no name that I could discern.
I honestly didn't think that was a reference to something, so I didn't look.
Yep.
It could have been. There are plenty of pizza places
Mhm.
in New York City. So
Now, is the Meat Puppets an actual group?
yes, they are.
Okay.
They are an American rock band that was formed in Phoenix, Arizona in 1980. They originally started as punk rock before they created their own style of mixing psychedelic rock and country. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. Now, the phrase whenever Maxwell asks what's Fran doing or going, I'm going to Disneyland. Like that's like the classic phrase, Disneyland or Disney World, after like someone wins the Super Bowl.
Right. Or I thought the Stanley Cup, but yeah.
I guess any like sporting after it's like, what are you gonna do now? I'm going to Disneyland.
Right. So according to our friends at Wikipedia, I'm going to Disney World or I'm going to Disneyland. They are both advertising slogans used in television commercials that started airing in 1987. Um, and I quote, the commercials most often are broadcast following the Super Bowl and typically feature an NFL player usually the Super Bowl MVP, shouting the phrase while celebrating the team's victory immediately after the championship game, end quote.
Yep. That's where I know it.
So,
Um,
cycle 2 is apparently a type of dog food.
oh, okay.
Rescue 911 was
Oh,
an
yeah.
American docudrama that aired on CBS from 1989 to 1996. It was hosted by William Shatner and featured reenactments of emergencies involved in calls to 911.
I used to watch it as a kid.
Did
I don't.
you?
Yep. I like, and there's like the opening, like I still have it in my mind. Like, yeah. So I watched it.
F. Lee Butler, we talked about briefly. I believe that's a reference to F. Lee Bailey, who's a criminal defense attorney who helped defend O.J. Simpson as part of the Dream Team. That's
Gotcha.
from Wikipedia. He was actually involved in a number of high-profile cases, but that's the one that would have been, I think, most pertinent.
I'm assuming the Mike Douglas is Michael Douglas.
I believe,
right?
yeah, the talk show host of the Mike Douglas Show.
Oh, different then. Okay.
Interestingly, according to our friends at Wikipedia, the Mike Douglas Show helped Aretha Franklin and Barbra Streisand gain recognition.
Oh, interesting.
So there's a Barbara reference embedded in there. The Amazon, where the woman picked up the bug that laid eggs in her cheek, which sounds absolutely terrifying. That is a reference to the rainforest, not an online retailer.
Yeah, and we have another Dr. Quinn reference.
We
I feel like
do.
we've talked about her before, right?
I don't know if we have. I mean, I think Fran has referenced her, but I'm not sure we ever actually described it. Dr. Quinn was an American Western drama about Dr. Michaela Quinn, who moved from Boston to Colorado Springs. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia and my memory. Mike Wallace. Oh, yeah. 60 Minutes. We've definitely covered, because Gracie made in the line in the show I've Got a Secret, she made a comment about how horror movie she can watch at 60 minutes that she can't stand. Mike Wallace was an American journalist, actor, game show host, and media personality who served as one of the original correspondents on 60 Minutes when it debuted back in 1968.
And then in the end credit scenes, the Playboy channel. I think we've talked about Playboy before.
I believe we have.
Yeah. Any other notable New Yorkers?
Let me think. So she references Belmont Hospital, but I think that's actually a reference to Bellevue Hospital. But I'm not certain. There's a reference to Coco Van, which is I didn't actually know what it was. I know it was a fancy sounding dish. According to dictionary.com, Coco Van is chicken stewed in a sauce of wine, diced pork, onions, garlic, and mushrooms. So many things in there that
that you personally would.
I would not eat. No. I think that's it. I'm out otherwise.
Okay. Yiddish cup?
So you all know what I'm gonna say. Pepperoni and Canadian bacon on pizza would not be kosher for a variety of reasons, including 1, pig is not kosher, and 2, if you're following kosher, you do not mix meat and dairy. So she also references a bar mitzvah, which we've talked about previously, which is the ceremony recognizing a boy transitioning from childhood to adulthood when he turns 13. He's now a man. He becomes a son of commandment. Hence bar mitzvah. Did I miss any?
I don't believe so.
Excellent. I love it when I don't miss any.
So 90s nostalgia. Go for it. Go for your classic.
Old cars.
Yes, because we definitely see them like outside of the hospital. Like
yeah, we see a lot of them outside the hospital. We also see them in front of the Sheffield home. I actually have non-car related ones this week, so I'm excited.
Oh, well, I'll let you open with a non-car one then.
Okay, cool. the paper medical records when Fran's dropping Maggie off to be a candy striper.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I remember as a kid going like to the dentist and seeing all the medical records or their dental records. You don't see those as much anymore because so much is now electronic.
Yeah, instead of like, because it used to be when you were waiting in the doctor's office, you'd hear them like drop your file outside the door and you could hear the doctor like pick it up before they came in. Now it's, at least where I am, they come in, they sit down at the computer, log in to pull up your file.
Right.
There's not a paper file.
Exactly. Would you like to share one?
Yeah, so just the whole thing with like somehow Sylvia finding Fran at the hospital and calling her on a landline. These days, again, with cell phones, Sylvia would not have any problem locating Fran
Correct.
Via text, phone call, whatever it may be.
Correct. Although I will say, if you are a patient in a hospital, there probably will still be a phone next to you so someone could reach you. So,
Probably. I don't know. But in terms of, I'm not a doctor. I'm not in the medical field. I'm just saying, I'm thinking probably the protocol is not what we saw.
I would
in terms
think not.
of a patient under anesthesia. But anyway, and then like I said earlier, just Maggie's outfit was very 90s to me.
Mhm.
I don't even know, like, do they still have candy stripers like as a position?
I don't know.
Like it seems like I haven't heard of, I don't know.
So, according to our friends at Wikipedia, candy stripe. So, and I quote: hospital volunteers, also known as candy stripers, in the United States, work without regular pay in a variety of healthcare settings, usually under the direct supervision of nurses. The term candy striper is derived from the red and white striped pinafores that female volunteers traditionally wore, which are culturally reminiscent of candy canes. The term and its associated uniform are less frequently used in current clinical settings. End quote.
Okay. Yeah, because I just feel like I have not seen that.
Yeah. So actually, kind of interesting. Also, according to our friends at Wikipedia, Candy Stripers originated as a high school civics class project in East Orange, New Jersey, in 1944.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Um, I I wonder if there's still things.
Yeah.
Wonderful listeners, if you know, let us know.
Yeah.
Um,
At least to me, it seems a bit dated now. But
it does seem a bit dated, but I also wonder if it's dated like in the absolute sense, or if the medical community has sort of changed in the past couple years. Like, if things hadn't gone the way they've gone, if it would still feel as dated.
yeah.
Do you have any other 90s nostalgia you want to mention?
Well, I guess thinking now with Gracie coming down, Fran, the commercial's over.
That's the one I had.
Oh, okay. Sorry for stealing that.
It's fine. It's fine. I still have the best scene from you, so it's all good.
But yeah, obviously now, I feel like a lot of people just use streaming services, so you wouldn't have as much of the commercials. And in fact, like locally for me, like our local cable providers has stopped like recently doing any kind of cable channels.
Huh.
Our internet provider no longer offers it. So
Interesting.
yeah. So yeah. Did you have any others?
Just to piggyback on that, I had the commercials over comment. Not just streaming, but also people now use things like DVRs, so they could just skip through the commercials on what they taped. So yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. So any future fun?
Of course, I have future fun for you. All right, so I think I commented last week that Peter will be out next week, I believe. I think it's only next week. Maybe I'm on it. Actually, it's 2 weeks from now. My mistake. In 2 weeks, Peter will be out in favor of Sean. Maxwell is not going to be the last Sheffield who is hospitalized. Similarly, this is not the only time we're going to see the Metropolitan Hospital sign. We will see it most notably in season 5 in the episode A Rash to Judgment. For those who've seen this series before, that is exactly the episode you think it is. And then also in season 6, Mom's the Word. A later credit card application by Fran, which Niles just happens to snoop into and see, on which Fran lied, leads Niles to quit his job at the Sheffield home and gets hired by Aunt Frida as a houseboy. That does not last long, so no one needs to worry. Yeah, those are the things that come to mind. I guess it's now time to rate the episode.
Yes, and it's your turn to go first.
And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm giving it a 5, in case people couldn't tell.
in case I couldn't tell, yes. Not surprised.
I've had a smile on my face the whole time we've been talking about this episode. This is one of those episodes that I enjoy watching over and over again because it is just, I think it's just delightful. Even though I know what's coming, it's just, the web is woven so nicely. And again, that scene with Fran being told to prep Maxwell for surgery it carries the show. So what are you going to give it?
Yeah, so despite some of the things I've pointed out, I'm also giving it a 5 because it was hilarious.
You realize 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row we've given it the same score.
Wow, we're just like on the same wavelength
Apparently.
this season, I guess. But yeah, no, I was not expecting that particular thing to play out. Again, that particular scene was something I could totally see in I Love Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I'm glad we're on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else you want to say?
I don't believe so.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 44, What the Butler Sang.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.